I want you to remember, Clark, in all the years to come, in all your most private moments, I want you to remember the one man who beat you.
Since the cancellation of Wolfgang Petersen's Batman v Superman, fans have been eager to see this classic matchup brought to the big screen. Years later, director Zack Snyder would take on this insurmountable challenge. Batman v Superman was the highly anticipated sequel to 2013's Man of Steel. There was a lot of anticipation for this film. Depending on who you ask, Zack Snyder's ambitious film may or may not have succeeded, but there's no denying that this movie presents a fresh perspective on the DC universe. Zack Snyder had a unique vision for this film, one that required months of development and experimentation. From Batman's original design to the many approaches to Doomsday, let's take a look at the many concepts and plot elements that were cut from Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Numerous live-action Batsuits have been portrayed over the years, and each one has a distinctive appearance that has endured as an iconic part of pop culture. Despite how different they all seem, there's one feature that practically all Batsuits have. All of them serve as body armor designed to keep Batman safe. Most live-action Batmen have strayed away from the character's more fabric-based suits. This is because it's simply impractical in live action, and it's really hard to pull off without making someone look ridiculous. Fabric-based suits have thus been mostly restricted to comic books, animated TV shows, video games, and the Batman 1966 TV series. Director Zack Snyder embraced Batman's comic appearance when making Batman v Superman to set himself apart from all the other live-action Batsuits of the past. Inspired from the costume of Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns, this incredible Batman suit was created by costume designer Michael Wilkinson, Snyder, and other members of the production team. Batman looks as if he jumped straight out of a comic book. The production team managed to mend reality and fiction into one seamless pair. In other words, they were able to successfully adapt a costume for the big screen that ordinarily wouldn't work in a real-world setting. This suit is a true work of costume engineering, but it required lots of trial and error to get to this final design. Early on, the designers were still tinkering with the character's appearance. Because this was a completely new depiction of the character from the very beginning of his creation, it was unclear how he would look. As the drawings demonstrate, Batman is quite plain in appearance. Since it was still unclear where they were going with the aesthetic, his costume isn't particularly intricate at this point. However, one thing you'll notice about several pieces of these illustrations is just how the cowl stands out. For starters, the form of Batman's mouth opening is unique. It appears to flex in many different directions and curls upwards near the nose, exposing Batman's whole nose area to public view. It's a fascinating creative decision to leave out Batman's nosepiece. However, any reasonable person would consider this appearance to be suspect. The huge ears on this cowl, which more closely resembles Batman's classic appearance, are a design aspect I really like. Large pointed ears have always been my favorite, especially when they're silhouetted. You'll also notice that Batman here actually has a nose covering, which is just the icing on the cake. The one advantage of not knowing exactly how a character will look in a movie is that it enables many different and original interpretations of a traditional design. This fact was recognized by costume designer Michael Wilkinson, who created several concepts for potential Batman looks. For further refinement, he'd give these sketches to artist Constantine Sekeris, who'd later transform these drawings into a collection of concept art. As you can see, Batman here is wearing a suit that is considerably more metallic and futuristic in appearance. The appearance of the Batsuit in this instance is significantly more militaristic, demonstrating that Batman adopted a body armor aesthetic early on, similar to the subsequent Batman films. But compared to the other outfits in movies, this one is more metallic, bright, and technological. An additional piece of concept art for Batman was made by Constantine Sekeris. This one adopts a body armor style for Batman once more, but it doesn't veer too far from the prior idea. The only significant differences this time around are the suit's appearance, which is considerably darker and dirtier when compared to the more polished appearance of the previous concept. In addition to the cowl, which has a different design, shorter ears, and no white eyes. You'll also observe that the armor of the suit appears to have numerous dents and scratches. You see, Zack Snyder wanted his Batsuit to appear worn out, like something Bruce Wayne has worn for several years without changing, which explains both the battle damage and the appearance of filth on the costume. Even the faint reddish coloring on the armor can be seen, which appears to be rust. These suit concepts have a striking resemblance to the Arkham Knight Batman suit, which makes me wonder if it served as a huge design influence. Michael Wilkinson would also bring on artist Jerad Marantz, who would also do some early explorations of the Batsuit. As you can see, once again, the Batsuit takes on a full-body metallic appearance. The suit's metal shines and glistens in the light, giving the impression of stainless steel. Even the gold belt now blends in with the rest of the costume because of the dedication to the black and silver style. Additionally, the suit's details were played around with by the artist. As you can see, he tried out a variety of styles for the mouth opening, torso details, and shoulder padding. He also included a chin strap. Jerad went all out with the details in this concept, resulting in an extremely busy design that assaults your eyes, with detail pouring from every corner of the suit. Now, one thing you'll notice about a majority of these outfits is how much leaner Batman looks in comparison to the body of the final film, which is significantly bulkier. The bat symbol also has a striking resemblance to the Nolan bat symbol, and the alternate symbols were only slightly altered versions of this design. These Batsuits represent a very early inception of what Batman in this universe would have been: leaner, more reliant on military body armor, and slightly influenced by the Nolan-era Batsuits. However, Michael Wilkinson would ultimately come to the conclusion that this was not the direction they wanted to go with the suit. It was perhaps around this time that Zack Snyder decided on the look he wanted for his Batman. Now highly influenced by The Dark Knight Returns, Snyder pictured his Batman as a massive tower of muscle, one that relied on strength, speed, and agility to achieve his goals. He had to rely less on his armor and more on his own abilities. Because of this, these armored Batsuits were no longer practical in light of Snyder's clear vision. To match this new vision for the character, the Batsuit now needed to be more fabric-based, and Batman would grow from a leaner body to a more massive figure. In the beginning, designers would have to envision how the fabric would look and fold around Batman's body. These pieces of concept art were produced with the express purpose of showing how a more fabric-based suit might look and whether or not it could really be adapted for live action. There is no doubt that this experiment would be successful, and this concept would continue to evolve into several variations. Batman appears to be wearing a fabric-like outfit in these concepts. However, it appears that the designer made an effort to include some metallic armor in this design. Although the exterior of Batman's suit is made of fabric, there is a substantial layer of metallic body armor underneath. But since Snyder intended Batman to be a tower of strength who didn't need armor, This novel approach to the look simply was not viable. Later concepts would embrace the more simple fabric appearance, and the armor on the suit would be relegated to just the black areas on the suit, like the cowl, bat logo, boots, and gloves. These designs and the final outfit differ significantly in that Batman previously wore a cape that covered his whole body, further enhancing his look. This concealed appearance for Batman actually makes him seem more otherworldly and frightening as a result, although this appearance would likely be rejected because a cape this large would not be realistic. Eventually, Batman's look would become finalized, but you can still notice tiny differences in the design, such as the Bat logo, which retains a slightly different design and has a faint white outline around it, helping the Bat logo to pop even more. When designing the Batmobile, Snyder wanted it to complement the Batman of this universe. In other words, he needed it to be large and intimidating, like a military vehicle. Snyder also wanted the Batmobile to be practical, with every corner of the vehicle having some kind of purpose. With these ideas in mind, Snyder would approach production designer Patrick Tatopoulos to help bring his vision to life. Tatopoulos would create this sketch of the Batmobile on a napkin. The Batmobile went for a sharp and long design that was meant to look intimidating to a viewer. Now this profile of the Batmobile represents the final design they ended up going for. However, that does not mean that they didn't experiment with alternate looks. As you can see, Tatopoulos experimented with many different approaches to the Batmobile. Some took on a much larger and tanky appearance. They look like heavy-duty military vehicles with an emphasis on destructive and defensive power. This is a Batmobile that commands your full attention, especially when it's coming right at you. Tatopoulos also played around with these elongated versions of the Batmobile. This design is much more simple than the ones we see in the film. Judging from the long bodies of these Batmobiles, this Batmobile seems to prioritize speed over everything else, and at first glance, doesn't appear as destructive and defensive as the others. Other Batmobile designs are slight variations on the final look. They don't stray hugely from the chosen design and only really have very few tiny alterations. Doomsday had one of the most interesting redesigns for a famous comic book character. Zack Snyder took its iconic appearance from the comics and stripped it down to its bare essentials, appearing like a proto-infant version of the character, not yet evolved to its final form. In fact, that was the whole point behind this design, as Doomsday was meant to slowly evolve into the character we all know. However, during the film's early development, the production team had briefly explored and experimented with Doomsday's original comic appearance. As you can see from this 3D model, Doomsday resembles his original look more closely, appearing like he jumped straight out of the comics. In this concept, Doomsday appears like he evolved to adapt to a winter-like environment, judging by the snow in the background, his bluish skin, and the white hairs attached to his back. Now keep this concept in mind because it comes into play much later. Other concepts also embrace this comic-like appearance, with spikes protruding all over Doomsday's body, sometimes forming strange and interesting shapes, almost like some kind of biological suit of armor. This embrace of Doomsday's comic look is highly commendable. However, at some point, this faithful approach would be toned down to better fit in with what Snyder was going for. These concepts took the original Doomsday design and toned down several elements. However, you can still tell that they're trying to maintain many elements of his comic appearance. Remember though that Doomsday in Batman v Superman is meant to be an infant version of the character. one that's meant to eventually evolve into the true Doomsday. And it seems like although these concepts pretty much appeared like an early version of an ever-evolving Doomsday, certain tweaks still needed to be made to the design to truly capture what Snyder was going for. Take a look at these conceptual sketches as they most closely capture Snyder's vision for how Doomsday would appear in the film. Doomsday no longer had many spikes all over his body, but only a few handfuls isolated to select areas on his body. In fact, these were less like spikes and more akin to bumps. Several concepts you see would embrace this kind of look for Doomsday, a hulking body type with a rounded face and bumps all spread across the body. These concepts now truly appeared like a proto-version of Doomsday, one that would evolve over time. Now in most of these concepts, Doomsday's design doesn't stray very far from each other, as they all share many common elements. But that does not mean that some concepts don't sometimes stray and create something very unique in appearance. Some concepts, for example, take Doomsday's more ape-like posture and body and embrace a much more lean and humanoid appearance. When you see Doomsday, you almost get the impression that he holds some kind of high intelligence. The way he stands and carries himself radiates a kind of enlightened aura, and his human-like face and body only enhances his presence. This human-like approach to Doomsday's design is an interesting creative choice, but certain concepts went even further with the redesigns. In this Doomsday concept, the artist seemed to be going for a more outer-worldly spider-looking creature with its many spider-like eyes, disgusting-looking pink flesh, and sharp, rough-looking armor plating. Combine this with its two sharp teeth, and this concept represents one of the most aggressive and scary looks I've seen so far. Now Doomsday served as the final antagonist of Batman v Superman, who acts as a catalyst to bring Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman together. He's also the villain who ends up killing Superman in the end. However, there's a chance we could have had an entirely different antagonist. In the original envisioning of Batman v Superman, Metallo would have served as a major antagonist. His role in the film is unknown. However, judging from his story arc in the film, we can speculate on how his arc led him to become this famous villain. You see, the character Wallace Keep holds huge resentment towards Superman and Bruce Wayne. Superman was responsible for him losing both his family and his ability to walk, but he also hates Bruce Wayne, who he believes neglected him and stopped financially supporting him. Lex Luthor would recognize the disdain Wallace has for the two men and believes he's the perfect man to take both heroes out. Lex would offer Wallace a suit of armor that uses kryptonite weaponry, and with these newfound resources, he would wage war against Batman and Superman and finally have his revenge. Other concepts of Metallo don't give him a full-on suit of armor. Judging from the art, we can infer that he can control a robot through some kind of neural connection, judging by the plethora of wires attached to his body. Metallo was likely cut out of the film in favor of using Doomsday, and Wallace's role in the story would be greatly altered. In this concept, we see Batman encountering Superman on a rooftop near the bat signal. It appears like Superman purposely turned it on to lure Batman to the location. We can infer that this is the first time the characters meet, and judging from the Nolan bat symbol, it's clear that this sequence was thought up very early in development. Now this scene was clearly highly considered, since you can once again see this scenario illustrated in several other pieces of concept art and conceptual sketches. Now it's unknown why this version of their meeting was cut out of the film, but it was likely altered due to script revisions that required them to meet differently. This would explain why their first encounter is so different in the final film. The Flash makes a full-on appearance in Zack Snyder's Justice League, and Snyder had a very unique and interesting approach to both how his powers are visualized and the design of his suit. However, during the development of Batman v Superman, we could have seen the Flash in a completely different suit. In these concepts, the Flash's suit appears much more high quality and streamlined. Although the suit appears much more refined than the one in the film, you'll still notice plenty of scratches all over the suit, showing how Barry has been using this suit for a very long time. You'll also notice that there's a plethora of yellow markings, lettering, and white symbols in certain areas, revealing how this suit was still built and put together by Barry himself. This suit perfectly fits in with the practical approach Zack Snyder was aiming for. This was meant to be a kind of prototype suit, explaining the put-together feel it gives off. There were also a plethora of environmental concepts created for the film, such as shots of Gotham City. One thing you'll notice about a lot of these environmental concepts is the fact that the production team considered setting the film during the winter time, judging from the fact that you can see this season in several pieces of concept art. This also explains why Doomsday appears like he evolved for a winter environment in a previous piece of concept art. There were also concept art depicting different approaches to action scenes in the film, such as these ones. The fights in these concepts were perfectly translated to the final film, with Batman and Superman desperately fighting it out to the best of their abilities. But there's only a few slight differences between the art and the film. For one thing, Batman and Superman suits are visibly more destroyed. Superman's suit is torn in several areas, and the upper sections of Batman's armor has been completely destroyed in the battle, exposing his skin underneath. There were other approaches to fight scenes in the film. In this concept, we see the Trinity taking on Doomsday. However, this time, Batman actually joins in the fight, slamming Doomsday's head with explosives. This would have made the final fight sequence more epic. It also appears like Batman was meant to keep his armored suit at this point in the film. As we all know, in the final film, Batman takes a massive backseat in the fight as he's powerless to stop Doomsday, mostly running away when Doomsday comes after him. It also seems like Batman was meant to have a machine gun at some point in the final fight. I'm assuming Batman would have used this gun against Doomsday in the final fight, and would have unloaded into Doomsday with Wonder Woman right behind him, judging from this conceptual sketch by Zack Snyder. There were other minor pieces of concept art for the film. Some show alternate approaches to Batman's gear, such as different designs for the Batwing, which looks very cool and visually appealing. There were slightly different approaches to some of his gadgets in the film, such as this alternate design for his grapple hook, and this completely alternate take on Batman's armor. First off, his mask looks extremely visually appealing, with the large red visor and the yellow color spread across the suit. The artists also tested out several different approaches to Superman's monument. As you can see, they take on a brighter silver color, and Superman has a plethora of different poses. However, eventually, this silver approach to the monument would be cut in favor of stone. Even this stone monument takes on a different pose, and the red lettering on the chest has a different meaning. Other concepts in the film have different approaches to environments and certain scenes. Sadly, many of these concepts could not make it into the final film, but it's always nice to look back at the unused ideas and see the many directions this film could have went.